All right. So our October Climate Action Plan Committee can come to order. It has been a few months. Way back to July, if you can believe it. July was the last time we met.
Feels like July.
It just feels like July too.
How's that thing, right?
This is not-
As the climate
we all
action
know.
committee.
It's just-
It's not good.
Well, it's
But
just
it's
global
also
warming.
good.
But we will still enjoy it. So our first order of business is the minutes from the July meeting. And unless anybody has any proposed edits, we'll put those on file. Okay. So Catherine, if you could put that on the file for us, that'd be great.
Yes.
So our agenda for today, did everybody get the agenda?
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll go through it. I want to talk briefly about the opt-in specialized warrant article. We'll go into the status of the climate action plan, and hopefully everybody received this. We're excited to see it. We just printed it out. I want to talk sort of in broad strokes about how we start socializing this. What's the roadshow potentially going to look like? And then dig into two somewhat meaty topics. One of them is social cost of carbon, which is had a chance to read this, that we've embedded the concept in this draft of the climate action plan. But I think it's something that we probably want to have a public conversation about. And then the second one is these Eversource transformer upgrade delays. And Hank, I know that PSAB had some experience with this, with the chargers that went in. So it'd be useful for us to have a little discussion about what we think we can do about that. Exactly. I have some thoughts.
The minutes are showing this comment.
Yeah. So first is the opt-in specialized warrant article, and I don't know if anybody had a chance to go to any of the public meetings. Rachel, you were at the select board hearing. Cecilia, you've seen a bunch of this stuff up close as well. So I think if I don't know if it's a surprise, select board voted 5-0 in favor of putting it of passing. So that's great. Unanimous is always good. We had to twist Kevin's arm a little bit, but we just
Let the record show he's
there was no twisting of arms. Then the finance committee voted 8-1 not to recommend. And they had some concerns that were raised in their meeting. One of them was around unknown, right? It's fast, they felt. They'd like to have seen more housing data, actual housing data, built under the new specialized code. To date, only 4 of the cities and towns that have adopted the specialized code have begun issuing warrants. We have spoken with 2 of those cities, and they say it's business as usual. Nothing's changed. And from a building efficiency requirements perspective, as we all know, there's no change in the way that those buildings are built. Built with the same exact energy efficiency requirements. The biggest change is if they use fossil fuels, they need to pre-wire for electric or solar. We did explain that to finance committee, but they were unpersuaded. So that brings us to where we are today, which is tomorrow. We have a final deadline to upload all materials that are in support of the article on the town meeting's website. I think the last I checked, all we had was an FAQ there. I'm not sure if Katie King was coming to put additional ones on, but I think she did maybe is to take a lot of the resources that were in other source places and move it all to the FAQ. I did see some slides and some graphs and some other things that were not in the original DOER FAQ, which we started with.
I'm not aware of what her, if any, next steps she was working on.
Okay.
Have you coordinated with her?
I've talked to her a couple of times. The only thing that I've suggested, because of the question around housing data, is to there is a link, I believe, to the DOER evaluation of costs of the stretch code versus the base code, but it's not really the stretch code versus the specialized code, which can be confusing. Oh, okay. right?
Yeah.
So I mean, since the costs are really additional wiring, potentially an upgraded panel. And then you've got the solar, we don't really have that piece. So maybe that's something she is still working on. I'll follow up with her before the end of day tomorrow. That's really the only other thing. The one other idea that I have floated was the built environment plus report. Did I share that with this whole group? So built environment plus has been collecting data of net zero and net zero ready homes, not homes, net zero and net zero ready buildings of all types. So from single family, small, single family, large, multifamily, commercial, labs, schools, large residential buildings, et cetera. And they've been both calculating the total square footage that has been added, and it's growing exponentially. And for a subset of that data, they also have building costs. And so the building costs are for over 80% of these buildings within 1% of the non-net zero ready. So net zero ready is not really the same as the specialized code. It was supposed to be a net zero code, but it's a little different. But these net zero ready buildings would effectively be above code. Like they'd be zero HERS buildings. Right? And so it's interesting to see actual buildings that have been built, not theoretical models of what might be built, that exceed code, that show that 80% of them are within 1% cost. So that's one other thing that I'm going to ask Katie to put up on the website, because it would be useful for people to see it. And I think it does speak directly to one of the finance committee's major concerns is the lack of data of homes and buildings that are built. And I think also we've seen that in the school buildings, that's also within a few percentage points before rebates and MSBA and supplemental kicks in.
Kevin, are you speaking to this one article?
No,
Mary
Mary
Anderson.
Okay. Well, her quote was great then.
And here, they worked on Cecilia worked on that.
Did you write that for her?
No, her and Amy did it.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
You were
I just got it from them.
Got it, all right. So that's one other thing that we want to make sure that we get in. The other thing that I had a conversation with Michael Bratbrice from the school committee on is the change in MSBA policy towards school buildings.
Oh, right.
So I'm going to try to summarize this, Hank, and I'm going to ask you to correct me. My understanding is under the previous policy, Leeds Silver was the target for getting the supplemental funding. There might have been some other requirements on top of that.
Lead silver, correct,
Leeds Silver. And if you hit the Leeds Silver,
was 2%,
you'd get a 2% supplemental on top of the MSBA funding.
which is what we got on the Sunita Williams School.
So that's considerable money on how much was Sunita Williams?
59.
59 million.
Yeah.
So an additional 2% of the, well, not of whatever, that's the part that 2% of what they gave
Of
us,
what they gave.
which was, do you remember what that was?
Our total net was around 20%.
20%, okay. It's about 10 million, so another 200,000 or something.
Yeah.
So what's changing is that the Leeds Silver threshold is no longer enough.
Is the minimum required along with the stretch code?
The specialized code.
No,
Oh, okay.
so their base.
Oh, I'm
minimum-
sorry. This is before the supplemental kicks in.
Yeah, so their base requirement now is lead silver plus the stretch code, the current stretch code. And to get an additional 3%, you have to adopt the specialized code. And there's some indoor air quality additional requirements.
Right.
Can you get the 3% kicker with? Even if can you choose to build according to the specialized code, even if the town doesn't?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
And would
And
that
that- and
qualify
that's-
you for the 3%?
Yes.
yes.
It would. Okay.
And so if there's, if there are MSBA projects in towns that have the base code, they're required to do LEED silver if they want to get LEED silver and the stretch code, if they want any reimbursement from the MSBA.
Okay,
And then they can go for the additional 3% if they do the special.
so it's an optional on top of.
Yes.
I got it. All right. So that's the other major difference.
Is that a point worth emphasizing? Because watching the video of the FinCom meeting and other conversations, I think people maybe are missing out. You're saying, well, you know, this is going to increase our school costs. So
Yes.
you see,
I think it's
there seems to be a lot of misinformation thrown around, particularly, you know, seems that some of the FinCom meetings, but concerns about what this does to us and.
yeah, so I think where the clarification could go is that when Katie presented at the finance committee meeting, that the building estimates were designed to the specialized code. That,
The updated version.
right.
Yeah.
That is necessary for the 3%. In other words, if we didn't build that, we lose the 3% supplemental, and there's no 2% supplemental to fall back to.
Correct.
And so that's an important piece. And I know that the finance committee did ask for that piece to be broken out. What was the delta between the buildings built to, I guess, LEED silver? But
Well, the cost increase that Jordan Whittier tacked on was $30 a square foot.
$30 a square foot.
That was it. I mean, these are really, really rough numbers because they're in feasibility.
They're not a
Hank,
design.
are we able to do like a $30 per square foot is X versus 3% is Y? Look, just to understand
Yeah.
what
So
the added
people don't have to
cost
do
is
that.
compared to the reimbursement. I don't know if the reimbursement covers the added cost or what that relationship is. I haven't run those numbers trying to look at the sheets, but I know that they added $30 a square foot,
Yeah.
right? So we should be able to get a rough
Yeah,
number.
yeah, I think as you have emphasized previously, and I think all net zero schools that have been constructed have seen that their operating costs go down. So when you look at it on a cash flow basis, it's cash positive from day one. That was the argument that the select board member from
Mark Janine from Lexington.
Lexington made.
So I'm not clear that that's true, right? As I used to say all the time when I was on the school committee, we're going to be paying more for energy because we're used to having buildings that are not heated or cooled.
Mhm.
And now that we have a building that is heated and cooled, we're actually going to be paying the price for that.
Okay.
So I think it hasn't been an apples to apples building. Like maybe if we'd had a building that was heated compared to a prior building that was heated, maybe that would have been true.
Mhm.
But all these buildings that we've done have included AC, right? So I'm not sure for us that comparison is true.
So Mitchell and Pollard don't have AC.
That's largely correct. I think Pollard has it in the main office.
They have,
maybe, but
they
that's
have
it.
window
Some
rattlers,
windows. Yeah.
window rattlers in Mitchell. And they
Yeah, they used to have
selected
none.
offices have split units.
Okay.
And they tried to put in indoor units and it didn't work very well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's too loud, too much, yeah.
And it reduces the temperature by maybe 2 degrees.
But there's heating.
Yes,
There is
Yeah.
heating.
yeah. So at any rate,
So anyway, that's the update on the warrant article, where we are today. I don't know, Mary Ann, are you aware of any other documents that are to be posted by tomorrow end of day?
so the FAQ is there
FAQs there.
and the presentation will go up,
Okay,
right? And I still haven't read the latest draft of the presentation, so I need to go through that still later tonight.
The only other thing we talked about before you came was the built environment plus data. This is the nonprofit organization that's been tracking net zero and net zero ready buildings. They've been going to Massachusetts. And they have several million square feet of that with cost estimates for 7 million square feet of it.
Okay,
And they're finding that over 80% of these buildings are going up for within percent of the non-net zero ready cost price. And so
have I seen that?
think you have, but you've gotten a mountain of stuff, so it could have been missed.
Or I might have read it like too long ago.
It's possible, right?
Yeah, I think
If we could repop that back up, I'm happy to take a look
I'll
at it.
send it over to you, yeah. I think what it addresses is the concern with the lack of data under buildings built to the specialized code. Net zero and net zero ready would effectively be above that code.
Okay,
Still more stringent code.
Yeah, I mean,
Still.
a net zero would be a zero HERS rating. Under this specialized code, you can build a 42 or 45, depending on whether or not it's mixed field. So you can build a less efficient building under the specialized code than net zero.
Okay.
And that's 7 million square feet in Massachusetts. A lot of it affordable housing, by the way.
right,
So I think it's an important data point for people to know that there are different ways to try to model what these houses might look like, and $30 a square foot is like a plug that somebody might put at this point because there's no design on the paper.
right,
But in actuality, we have a lot of data.
yeah,
Okay, so I'll pop that up to you later tonight.
great, thank you.
So the other thing is the climate action plan roadmap, and apologies that you only got it this morning. I tried to get it earlier this week, but it wasn't ready. This is a draft. It's not even a final draft. It's the first time that I've seen it with all of the content in it and a lot of the images in it. I got a couple of emails back from Hank and then from Catherine with some thoughts and ideas that were helpful. See, is Joe online yet? No, Paul. Paul, did you get the document as well?
Yeah, I did,
Yeah.
and I had some comments too. I can put them in the chat box or verbalize them or send them to you by email.
Why don't we do this? Why don't you send emails directly to me? Just don't copy everybody on the committee.
Yep.
Because it would be helpful to have it all in one place. So that we can aggregate it and get back to KLA.
Okay.
Well, I
This
was
is
gonna
not,
say,
so-
we're able to talk about it here. while we're
Absolutely,
all
right now we
here.
can,
So-
yeah.
So you don't have to email it, or you could do it also,
Yes.
but you're also able to raise your points here.
yeah, do you want to go through some of your points, Paul?
Yeah, first I would say it's very good. These are points that are not like, earth-shattering deletions. So I'll just start from the beginning. On the first pages where we say why we're taking these actions. Is there a way to include some sort of idea that we're doing this not just for people now, but for future generations, our children and grandchildren? I just think that creating some continuity for time seemed like a good thing to add in. And we kind of did it on the page 5 in the middle, where it says preserve Needham's history, culture, and quality of life, which kind of gets at it. But like really what I'm interested in saying is, is there a way to create a life and culture for, our families and subsequent generations that they can enjoy like we did? So if that's possible, that's terrific. The
Okay.
second thing is under the roadmap, which is on the same page, I noticed that the roadmap has 3 guiding principles: equity and inclusion, greenhouse emissions, and resilience. They're all important, but the greenhouse emissions seems like the most important one. Like nothing happens without that one. And it makes it look like that equity inclusion, because it's placed first, is the most important one. So I'm not prioritizing what we consider important, in terms of values or ethics, but like greenhouse gas emissions has to be number 1 in my mind, because that's what ultimately what we're trying to do. And then in terms of issues of equity inclusion, that should be part of the process by which we reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I don't know how you fix that illustration there, but I am a little bit worried that people will look at it in a way that will dilute the central core message, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay,
Can we just
Okay.
put that first?
yeah, I can raise this with them.
Yeah.
And the I don't know, and the guiding principle to me isn't greenhouse gas emissions. The guiding principle is net zero or.
Or reduction or
or
something,
reduction
right?
or-
Right. Yeah,
Well,
it has
it's
to be a
not
more
zero.
active term. Yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're not
Uh,
actually for greenhouse gas emissions, right?
Right.
Just sort of-
Good point.
Fair
On page 7, under greenhouse gas emissions, the second paragraph, it says, it's a little confusing. It says the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions was the transportation sector, 33%, primarily from private passenger vehicles, 30%. And I think some people will be confused. Does that 30% mean that private passenger vehicles are 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions or 30% of the 33%? So maybe a little clarity on that statement would be in order to
Or just
clarify the
delete.
fact that,
Just
you know.
delete the 30%, yeah.
Yeah, I could just delete the number.
even better. On page 9, it says, when it comes to the pathways to reduce emissions on page 9, electrify buildings and pursue efficiency is number 1. And then eliminate methane leaks is number 2. And so should electrify transportation be number 2 because that has a greater GHGS reduction? And, or was there a reason that methane leaks was put number 2 because it's easy to do or theoretically, and it is important, but I wonder if it should be number 2 or it should be lower down.
Or it should be in the order of.
The
Greenhouse
value.
gas.
Amount of
Reduction.
greenhouse gas reduction, yes.
Unless it happens to be a category that's very hard for us to do, but
Yeah,
in theory, you want it to bear some relationship to helping to prioritize our actions.
right.
I think they're going, if you look at
In order.
the sloping, the graph on page 8, they're keying to that, so they've got
Right.
Red,
uh,
yellow, blue.
buildings on the bottom,
So they build up.
yeah,
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily have to be in that.
it could,
order.
yeah, it could be, I'm sure they can reprioritize it.
Yeah.
I had some nitpicky things like call it a natural gas leak instead of a methane leak, because nobody wants natural gas leaks.
Right. It's
So
a
it's-
safety issue, right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can smell methane, right? Is that what it is?
well, you.
But when it
You
explodes,
smell what it all explodes, you smell what they add to the natural gas supply. So that you smell it.
all right, so there's an order here that doesn't feel correct. Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
even in the chart, the divert solid waste is just a thin green, layer of icing on top. It's not, and that, it's not on top of the chart because it's most important. It's just. So I don't know why, it doesn't have to necessarily follow on page 9.
Yeah, I think
I
some
mean, it
of,
does, that makes sense, it's at the bottom. So there's 2 hierarchies going on, and you don't, the chart, I mean, I see it, see what the value is defined on the list on page 9, I agree.
but some
Solid
of it,
waste is the bottom. Electrified transportation should be number 2.
but I think it's also easier maybe for people to get their hands around. We can
Yeah.
improve the efficiency of our buildings. We can stop natural gas leaks. Great idea. Electrified transportation, that's gonna be tougher.
Right,
And so there's a certain, the solid, tangible things that I can grab hold of is electrified buildings. Diverting solid waste, shifting to public transport. By then, I'm thinking,
Kind of hard.
that's good, that's a longer ask.
Okay. Paul, did you have others?
A couple more under TR 2.2A on page 11.
2.2A.
Yeah, so it says there, support electrification, installation of level 3 chargers. We never really discussed this, but is there a role for level 2 and level 3 chargers? And the reason I ask that is because a lot of the newer EVs now charge very fast. So people can get a charge on a level 2 as well as a level 3, which is significant. But I don't know if that's part of the plan or should be part of the plan.
I do think that,
Because they're easier to install and they cost less,
Yeah.
right? Obviously.
yeah, I think it's worth calling out because at one point, I believe KLA has even told us that to support full electrification, some models suggest a significant increase in the number of public chargers is going to be required, and they all can't be level 3. Right.
Can you just say through the installation? I don't know if we want to go through line by line.
No, no.
on this, but
I'm
just
making
pick
notes.
chargers.
On page 17, it says 52%, and it says oil 17. I don't know what oil 17 is. Is that a particular type of oil, or like, I think most people would look at that and not know what that means.
Yeah,
What is page 17? Wait a minute. I'm
I
not-
think it's a typo.
Net zero building.
By
I
the
think it's a
numbers.
typo,
Yeah, because I Google it and I get a bunch of hair products.
Yeah.
probably type of.
but
Where-
also,
where are we
but
on
also the
that?
percentages add up to 101%. So I
Oh,
think you
good
want to
one.
reduce, the 52 down to 51.
Or one of them. They
Yeah.
rounded up here
Yeah.
somewhere.
I think what it is,
I was
is
actually surprised by that number, so.
Yeah.
Shocking number. to me.
I thought it was.
I had no idea that there were so many.
I was
oil-
shocked. I was
Yeah,
shocked.
so we're confident in that number?
We should go back and double check.
It really
It could be
surprised me when I
dated.
saw it, yeah.
I just don't see that many oil trucks going around.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
My last point is under goal RE2 on page 13. And it is the first mention under RE 2.1A. It says especially vulnerable populations. And I think that's the first mention of anything in the action plan summary specific to the idea about equity and inclusion being important, which is part of the 3 guiding principles. And yet virtually at the end of the action plan summary are these 3 words. So the penetration in the document of a DEI element, if you will, is kind of hard to find. It's buried in some other elements of it, but it doesn't really come out. So that's sort of a global view, and I don't know how to fix that, but I think the question would be can there be more specific language, or was it meant to be vague to avoid, I don't know what the word would be, but political backlash or, unnecessary debate. So I guess that was just sort of a large view of that idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there is a mention of the Needham Housing Authority, but only in passing.
Okay.
I had a sort of a more global thought on this is we say why we're taking action. Variant's wonderful quote. But there's no context in there. I would think there'd be some transition saying, this is how the plan was put together.
That's a good point.
It isn't a consultant. It's a group from, we mention it in the governance section way in the back.
No, we did.
But all these people came together and worked on it, for really the past 12 months.
And in some
Oh.
of the other versions, there were like pictures, right, and by numbers.
Yeah, it's sort of a couple of pages saying, this came from the community and, even if, I don't know if it's appropriate to say KLA came in the second half of the game to help us put the thing, but it really is a Needham product from listening.
Yeah, and I mean, we certainly should have more of that up front.
Because nobody really,
It comes out on page 15.
Right,
by the
but
numbers, but
it should be.
not up earlier.
And even by the numbers, that doesn't really tell you much
Yeah,
about the.
Yeah.
Because it's,
and there were 3 meetings, doesn't sound like a lot, but they
It's-
were really big meetings.
well, and then there were there were the smaller meetings, and
What
it's
doesn't
not
work.
the usual suspects, I think. is
How do-
something we want to get across.
So here's the question, how do we feel about, I mean, we would probably need to ask permission for people to have their names listed if they participated. But I almost feel like people should know
Other-
who these people are, they're not just a mysterious group of 35.
Other
Well, it could be
climate
an
action,
appendix
other
that
climate
included all the
plans
working groups.
did
Yeah,
list everyone involved.
yeah.
And I thought that was pretty, and when we were looking at them with Andy's help in the summer of 21, that was 22. That was one of the things we took, was saying, yeah, they got people from here. So I think it's important
Yeah,
we list.
Yeah.
And it could, as well as the
I mean, it could be,
email address for the, and webpage for the CAPC should be up there.
yeah, I mean, the other thing, I mean, what they missed is they did miss all of the working group meetings that were last year, and not all the same people who were in the working groups were in the advisory teams. Advisory group, so, yeah, I agree. We need
And
to
it's
do more.
not by the number, it's sort of what the process was. This is how we went about
In
this.
fact, the numbers are less important than
The process.
the who and the glue and talking through things.
Yeah, so this needs work, and I also wonder,
It also, the 3 meetings with advisory groups of, made up of 35 people doesn't actually include everyone in this room. So,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
Or I'd
Yeah.
lead with the 35 and not the 3. I don't know. I mean, that just whole section would.
so I think there's actually a difference between governance and this process.
And the
Mhm.
And I almost feel like their governance page needs to be completely rewritten. Because our governance includes the whole town process by which these plans will go into effect. And that's, you know, I don't know what we should, how we would want to lay that out.
it's really almost a roadmap, and it, when we look at the actions, I ended up renumbering everything, because for a lot of these things, a zoning change or bylaw change is the first thing required.
That's,
And
that's
that's
what it
really-
feels like that ought to be focusing on, right?
And the governance, kind of make sure that how do we get this done within the requirements of town government?
Well, and I thought some of the things we identified early on about the governance, that we were gonna have a, sustainability coordinator, we were gonna be reviewing this plan regularly, we were gonna have metrics, like some of those
Maybe that's what
actions
this-
are not.
Maybe that's what should be in the summary, right? It
This
should
committee
be
itself.
how many
How we're gonna do
policy
that.
statements or policy changes were recommended, and codes, or we're recommending adoption, zoning implementations, permitting process.
So to me, one of the hard things that I noticed was I looked at this and I'm like, I look at all this stuff and I'm like, what am I doing first? I can't tell here. What are the 3 things I'm pulling out for a year from now? What are 3 things I'm pulling out for 2 years from now? Like, I can't get that from this. And so I was hoping that that the action plan would be a little bit more actionable.
Mhm.
And it doesn't come across that way to me.
Nor do I know what the goals are specifically. These are actions, they're not really written in outcomes or. I know they're under a header, but it's not clear
Right.
to me what a
Yeah.
lot of those other plans we saw had specific measures.
They
that-
did.
that-
Timelines,
Timeline,
Yeah.
yes, what we were doing in the short term, what we were
Short,
trying.
medium, farther out, yeah.
It feels more like selling the climate action plan to the public instead of telling us kind of what is our plan.
Right, which is.
You should
what
be
we
able to
were-
walk out and, right, and if we said here, implement it, like,
Yeah.
that would be,
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like it's there yet. to
Yeah.
do that.
so, we should go back to make sure that in our RFP and in the bid, that level of detail was specified. I seem to
we
recall.
certainly talked about it,
We
yeah,
talked about level of effort.
Yeah.
Prioritization. So,
A lot of other plans had a summary as well. Like a 1 or 2 page, like bullet plan that people could easily read. And
Right.
This one doesn't do that. So I think an overview would be very helpful as well.
executive summary kind of version.
And you could put it in a, some of these action plan summary in a rough timeline. So some things are to show, some things have already happened, some things are, you know, 23, 24, these are our goals, so on and so forth. Recognizing, you know, some of that initial,
Yeah.
that graph that we did way back when with
Yeah,
level of effort and, even though we don't have an exact timeline.
I don't know that you need an exact timeline, but there can be sort of a near term, medium term,
One-
long term.
1 to 2 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
Or even just, I think some of the others just identified which ones are we doing in the next 2 to 3 years,
And then
because
beyond.
then the plan is. That
You
you
gotta
need,
revisit
you have to
again.
review if
Yeah.
things change and then, but at
That's
least we would.
Even things like, you know, the fact that we want more solar, well, we've gotta get these zoning things,
Mhm.
so that lays it out, and here's why, you know. Why these
Okay.
procedural building blocks. are-
So these are good ideas, high priority topics, you know, what are the prerequisite actions to take that'll enable others?
Mhm. Which are dependent on, right? which-
Yeah.
That graph that you're on, Kevin, can I talk about that
Yeah.
graph for a second?
What page is
Page, what is it,
Eight.
8? The one on page 8 that has impact of strategies that starts at 2021. I would really love a graph somewhere in here that kind of went back to a real baseline, which is what, 2006, 8, it's something like that.
We don't,
What do we
I don't
have?
think we have the
no,
data.
we don't have that we did the baseline, I think initially, since it's townwide, the problem is we have it for municipal buildings. But when we first did this greenhouse gas inventory, we had data from some was 2017, 2020, various points, and one of the things that they did, that MAPC did, and that they did was to tighten it up and all get to 2021, and that was about as
So that's as close
good
as
as
we
we
can
could
get.
get.
Okay.
But maybe there's a headline that we could get to that are estimated like 2,000 admissions were, even if we can't
Well,
extend the whole graph
We
back.
have, you know, at a minimum, we have a story of the town in the swap from oil to natural gas, right? I mean, so there are some pieces of a story that we have. And it feels like somehow we need to be saying, we didn't just wake up in 2021 and say, oh crap, you know, we got to do something. We've actually been at this for a while, so things have already been coming down. I feel like that part of the story got kind of wiped out, and it feels a shame to have no tethering
No contact.
in
So
the
kind of
past.
a narrative that might start, you know, with, let's say, going, you know,
Yeah,
oil to
putting the
gas,
solar fields
you
on the
know.
dump, you know, that the town
Here are the
sort
things
of
we've
went
done.
through the big
communities,
items that the
whole-
town has prioritized, recognizing this
and
long
e-
before this window.
right, even the fact we did 2 solarized campaigns.
Correct.
We did the landfill, we did
Yeah,
green communities, we
Yeah.
did, you know, so.
So it feels to me like that needs to be somewhere
more context and
here,
history as well.
somewhere.
So
One of the
where
questions,
we come from, where we're going.
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was also along those lines is, you know, we jump right into this. It does feel like there's some real estate that should come before this. And one might be the history, like our story. 2 is, Marion, I don't know if the select board wants to put in a letter to constituents here, or if we want to invite Kate to put a letter from the town manager. It feels like it could be personalized.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
not, and it just feels like a,
Dear town residents.
Something,
Yeah.
you know, this is. you know,
Very
this is the work.
excited to be present,
Yeah.
and that could have some of the.
Yeah.
Here's how we got here.
And it could have some visuals. Yeah,
Became a green community,
We're excited to take the next step
yeah.
yeah.
together.
So, some of that could potentially be added after we end our engagement with KLA. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of the stuff that I have seen here, we need KLA for.
We have the one quote, but I think, and like a couple pictures, but this, and this was what we were worried a little bit about, is it could be for any town, and there just needs to be some,
It needs to be about us.
yeah,
More needed
feeling that
by-
this is, and like, yes, who's been, a little more about who's been involved, but more about Needham, where we come from. Well, I think some of the things we've talked about will make that happen. It's just, right now, if you didn't see the first page, this could say any town and any.
Right.
Mhm.
I do have a question also just on the front page.
Mhm.
I chafe a little bit, but it says prepared by KLA. We did a lot of work.
Well,
Right.
they shouldn't be, I mean, it should be
I shouldn't say it.
By the
town, it's a town,
It's a
town
town
of
effort.
Needham.
you know, town of Needham, because sustainable Needham.
There can
Citizens.
certainly
They
be
can get
some
credit at the
acknowledgement
end.
at the end,
Well,
yeah,
they go, I think they should go.
Credits
on
at the end.
So,
but good try.
I think we,
I also really wanted an updated picture of the town common.
Yeah.
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 So, yes, so again, this is still draft.
Yeah.
And I assume that what we're gonna get from them are the Acrobat files or whatever, not the Acrobat, Adobe
Postman, something.
It's been too long since I've been in publishing. I used to know what this is. It's probably very easy. I don't even remember that or not. But they're the source files. We should
Yeah.
get the source files so that we can take this and then we need to change photos. We need to add pages. Should be able to do
They
that.
were looking, I mean, we were trying to,
Yeah, and I think we can make another concerted effort for this
Yeah.
and try to send maybe one of the high school students out with a.
get a fire.
Yeah,
just
just
one.
Photo.
How about
Yeah,
how about a
leaves change
rededication?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it would be
right.
great to
Like
have
this-
a rededication with
Yeah.
people out there this weekend, but.
Can we have a,
Can we get the police to get their drone up there?
oh, they have a drone?
Yeah.
Oh, well, then let's get them to take the picture.
Yeah, officer rockets.
I was actually gonna suggest they bring the ladder truck up.
I
That
don't-
seems a lot more.
I don't think that they'll take my request for that, but they might take yours.
Who operates the drone, do you know?
I don't know, but, you know.
I'm away this weekend. Does anybody wanna?
I'm writing Kate to ask her.
Okay.
How about the chart, page
8.
You know, a few things, I don't understand. Why, like, there's drops, it doesn't, like, why do they correlate to certain years, and. They don't, like, there's no math behind this saying that we will electrify buildings and pursue efficiency, when will we do this? And why are you predicting? Like, it's, other than the graphic, there's not much math behind this, it's a lot of suppositions. And then, just observation, 26 years until we have to have it down to 0. That's shorter than most people's mortgages. You know, it's like, oh, okay. It always seems far away, but it's a funny thing. But I don't get the graph just doesn't have any math on it.
Well, I mean, what it does is you go into these individual ones, you
Okay.
have to see the targets. So it's based upon those targets.
Okay. Could those targets be somehow keyed, or, for instance, like the dotted lines going from electrified buildings, I get the pointing to the red is the red. But that looks like that's why, that's a wide axis, like, what are we doing here? Is there something that's happening?
In terms of
Why,
why,
it's like, what, I get they're just leader lines,
oh,
but it does look like maybe there's some action that's happening that's causing this graph now to bend down to 0.
they could even get rid of the leader lines in a way.
Yeah, they could.
One of the things that you raise a good point, because I was thinking about this with electrified buildings.
Yeah.
And pursue efficiency. We don't really explain that the grid is getting greener and what the current state of the grid is and why this is a good
Oh,
thing.
right, okay, yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why everything goes down, because as we're electrifying buildings and transportation. And suddenly we're going you know, we're gonna be 80% renewables in 2050 on the grid,
Right.
or maybe 100. So that's how we get there, but that's not clear to most people.
Right.
And I was explaining this to somebody about the code. And he said, you know, why don't we want to electrify everything? I said, in theory, it's all gonna be renewables. And he said, oh, that makes sense.
Right.
And I think that's something that, a bit of context that most people don't have, and that's why
Yeah,
this.
so there might be a better way to display this information and tell the story behind it.
Yeah.
I don't think you're,
It's-
can I paraphrase what you're saying?
Yeah.
You're not seeing what's driving this and you're not asking for the math, you're asking for the story.
Right. Yeah, I don't need to know.
It's a
Yeah.
tough,
I mean, there is a sentence in there that to achieve these reductions, an additional overarching strategy to purchase 100% of our electricity from new renewable energy sources is required. Second to last sentence above.
right? But
That
it
could
almost
almost be-
needs a little one of these boxes saying,
I don't-
you know,
okay,
why
yeah.
electrification?
The state will be greening the electrical grid. That's why this is falling. Right, looking at the
But I
top.
like your idea for a box.
Yeah.
Why electrical?
You know, they've got these lovely
Yeah.
graphic
And then-
boxes
And
and,
as homes move over to electric heating and appliances, that, you know, and are using the greener electricity, that's why this will shrink over time.
And then just one other observation about on page 7, the graph. Transportation 32.8%,
Which page you're at?
page 7.
seven.
By the way, you're never supposed to.
The donut
I
graph.
don't know if you know that. According to Edward Tufte and all the design experts in the world, pie charts are the worst thing. This is a
It's a
donut.
donut.
This is donut.
It's a donut.
It's even.
Donuts are tasty.
Is transportation people in Needham who have cars, or are we measuring
Yeah.
all the thousands of cars that go on 128/95? I mean, that's Needham, that's
No, we don't measure them, the 128.
that's, I was wondering, and then this one goes, well, that's when we get everyone's electric. Is that? Yeah. Is that what we're waiting for 2035, when everyone's electric?
That's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, but I felt like when I was reading the transportation, it's like, oh, cars, you need them, that's like when commuting, right?
That should be clarified. Yeah, they definitely said they do not count the 128 traffic.
It does include, you know, the train and the bus. When it's a need.
When it's a meeting,
Oh, okay.
pass through traffic. On city streets.
They measure that.
No,
Oh, pass through measuring for city streets?
no, if you're driving from
Wellesley,
Staples to Dover,
that's not counted.
that's not counted.
Okay.
It's
Registered
Needham-
vehicles.
registered vehicles in Needham and public transportation.
Okay.
I think everybody has to be tracked where they are.
Yeah, 'cause
Otherwise
that's-
it
it's
gets
coming
double
up of-
Counted and all kinds of things, so.
RMV data or something.
Okay.
All right, so we'll clarify that. Let's see if they can do something besides a pie chart.
This, and this pie chart doesn't include a little sliver for municipal, which I think is also a valid one to call out.
How small it is.
Yeah, how small it is.
It's-
We can't do this without you. Right?
Right.
It could be, that could be a separate line, since we're going by sources. One of the things I found it really confusing in some of the earlier versions where we had, you know, commercial buildings, residences, town buildings, or municipal output. Because they do, I thought they do a good job of showing how small this is.
Well, there could
I mean,
be,
there could be a sliver for municipal
yeah,
buildings, that five, four by three.
They had that in prior.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I know I have it in my current presentation, so,
they could get rid of wastewater,
we do
actually.
we do two pie charts,
okay, yeah,
two of the worst types of charts.
yeah, I have two pie charts.
Cause isn't wastewater municipal?
Yeah, wastewater is called out separate.
But is it?
It's,
you
From
could say-
everybody.
it's
You
from
could
all
say
of us.
It's
public,
just stormwater. Is it?
That's wastewater.
Wastewater.
Wastewater and stormwater, everything.
Any,
Wastewater, sewer.
any
Wastewater,
other,
so they're doing sewer.
Sewer, yeah.
Stormwater, drain, right?
Right.
So conflating the two together.
any other macro problems that we,
I have another micro problem,
Me too.
another
Like,
macro problem?
little.
I got lots of
specific
micro
one.
ones.
Okay,
On page. What page is this? Page 18? Is that what this is? 19? Page 19.
transportation.
That's my micro problem.
Well, actually, this by the numbers, how does Needham compare to other communities? Vehicle miles traveled per person per day. And it says 23 days. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah,
Oh, I was gonna say.
The chart doesn't say what the chart says it does, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it's saying as a result.
Right.
Yeah,
But also, I wouldn't compare us to Plymouth, like, we're not, it's, no,
that,
or, I mean, I would use towns
Well,
that feel relevant.
Concord or Hingham or
Fine, yeah, but Plymouth is like,
Wellesley.
yeah,
New Bedford is,
even New Bedford is
Right.
not the right,
No.
Weston's
yeah,
fine, Lexington.
yeah, I think the other issue here is that. Vehicle miles traveled per day per person.
I mean, I think
I
it was,
wasn't
It's
really
both a
sure
mile
what that-
issue, but also what you're using. Right, and this kind of buries the lead, which is,
Mm,
it wouldn't be so bad if you're doing 23 days of travel your month, or whatever it is, 20, must be.
I don't
23
know what
23
they put the
miles.
chart of.
It must be 23 miles per
Yeah.
day. If it's 23 miles per day and an EV charged on an 100% green electrical grid, that's not as bad as 23 miles in an SUV that gets 12 miles a gallon.
although I think the overall point is that people in Needham are in their cars more than the good people of Lexington and Weston.
Perhaps, but that couldn't be because of where we work,
Right,
and you're
well,
not
right,
gonna be able to
right.
change your
No.
work very easily. I wonder if.
I don't know what the point is here. That's all
Yes,
I'm
it's,
saying.
I'm missing the
I
point
read
too.
it, I was like,
mhm.
Stop driving?
what is this?
That's not
Yeah.
really the message we wanna say.
Yeah, so at any rate,
Mm.
So they could find some other numbers.
well, they could start by telling me what they intended to show here, and then we could see if we think that's a good point to make.
Yeah,
But I'm not sure what point it's making right now.
it almost feels like either EV adoption or the number of people biking or taking public transportation to work would be a more relevant statistic and more consistent with what we're asking people to do.
Or comparing to other community, yeah,
Peers.
I don't know,
Yeah, it's a weak page.
Yeah,
By the way,
so,
all the links in here too, I was checking those out. They actually link and they go to what this comes to.
Oh, good.
although I did notice that the social cost of carbon
Ah,
link as a segue
Ah.
links to the EPA page from January 19, 2017, as in when they archived all these pages, but I don't know if there's a more current.
so, yeah, so let's talk about social cost of carbon.
I didn't even plan this.
It's a very good segue. So I asked them what they used for their data here and they didn't call it out. They're using the EPA's proposed rule that is due to go into effect by the end of 2023, which would value it at $190 per metric ton of carbon. It is currently under the EPA 51 per metric ton of carbon. Under the previous administration, it was 7.
Hmm.
And that
I think it
under-
was 6.
Okay, it was 6. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. And then under the previous administration, it was all the way up at 40, somewhere around there. And
the new
so
one is what?
190.
Okay.
So it's a significant increase. It's what they're using here. I don't think we're gonna solve this today. Good.
yeah,
But I want to put it on the table as something that I think probably is worth us solving and putting a stake in the ground is what we think the correct for Needham cost of carbon is. I made the point at the intro to FinCom meeting that in their deliberations over the opt-in code, they're implicitly valuing the cost of carbon at zero,
Mhm.
because all they're focusing on is the cost of implementation, not the costs of taking out of the equation. And so we went back and forth, and I said, do you think we should do this? It would be a nice objective way that we could all kind of look at some of these proposed actions and do a cost benefit analysis on those. And there was some hemming and hawing, but I kind of got that, yes, they were okay with it. They didn't think it was their job to do. I think they looked at you at one point and said, this is probably for the select board to decide. I would suggest that it might make sense for a small group, maybe from here with the select board's blessing and FinCom, with the chair of the FinCom's blessing, to look at the various approaches to valuing the cost of carbon and propose something that we can get behind. It is not zero. I will say that.
Well, and I think the question is, why would we not, if we choose not to go with the EPA standard,
Yeah.
right, we need to understand why we're not doing it.
And there's a lot, and so I've been reading a lot on cost of carbon. And it's very sensitive to all of the assumptions that you put in it.
Yeah,
So are you assuming, for example, that the cost of carbon is just what you measure at your border? Or are you trying to, I think of it as an externality that affects the planet and a harm that might happen elsewhere, like an island nation disappearing, is implicitly driven by all of our behavior. So we should value that loss as much as we should value the loss of someone's basement in need it. So that's one of the questions that drives the cost. Another question is something that happens 50 years from now, is it, if someone dies 50 years from now, is that life worth the same or less than a life that is lost today? And how do you discount those future costs? You know, do you do a high discount rate, which implicitly says that future is not as valuable as the present? Do you do a very low discount rate, which says we're going to leave the same planet it came into? All of these assumptions can make it so that you can come up with $6, $190. EPA, even with a 2.5% discount, gets it all the way up to $340.
Are there any so there are no neat categories? For example, when we're talking about energy, we'll measure site energy, you know, so what's the BTU from these lights versus the entire source going all the way back to the power plant, which allows you to say, well, you can choose your measurement box. Is there any sort of consensus on the bounds that, or is everyone doing their own thing?
No, I mean, there are like Nobel laureate economists who come up with models to do.
But is there anything standard so that there's sort of the equivalent of a, you know, a local cost of carbon versus a regional, global?
I haven't seen local versus regional. What I've seen is varying the discount rate is primarily where these costs go dramatically up or down.
What are they measuring? Like all FEMA costs, all disaster relief, all lost days of work, studies?
Lost GDP, lost, you know, buildings,
Right.
structure, heart attacks, premature deaths, food scarcity, war, refugee crisis. I mean, they build a very complicated model, and they try to look at everything. And there's a linear correlation between the amount of carbon in the atmosphere and the temperature.
Right.
And so what they then do is they say, okay, if we hit this temperature, this temperature, this temperature, this temperature, what are the things that will happen?
Right. Crop loss.
So we'll have 100,000 climate refugees if it hits here. We'll have 1 million climate refugees if it hits here. 100 million if it hits here. Right. And so that's how they build what they call the damage functions.
Okay.
And then it's like, do you want to use a 1% discount rate, a 2% discount rate, a 3% discount rate? Now, since so many of these horrible things are like 20, 40, 50 years away, those small changes in those discount rate have enormous impact on what the social cost of carbon is. Like, this year or next year, yes, things are going to happen, but it's not going to be it's not gonna dramatically change the 1%, 2%, or 3% discount.
So you know what? I do not think it makes any sense for the town to figure out their own cost of carbon.
I agree,
So I think we ought to just decide on a standard
yeah.
and live with it
Go with
and
the-
provide some contact.
Yeah,
problem with
because
EPA
are
is
they not the
EPA
authoritative voice on it, or like, are there multiple voices on that?
There are, I mean, so obviously the EPA has one,
Okay.
but that changes with each administration.
Sure.
We change administrations, like it's drive it all the way back to 6, and do we want to drive it all the way back to 6? I don't think so. There's also another approach that doesn't use the same damage function, which focuses on what's the value you need to put on carbon to drive the 2050 net zero. So it's more of a target based. How do I get to net zero in 2050? What's the value I need to put on carbon in order to get that? And that approach comes out closer to $100.
And there's no standard in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts does not have one. I looked at that. There's several states that have them. But Massachusetts is not yet one of them.
There is also a figure being used in the price to offset a metric ton of emissions, which is being used in the emissions laws in Boston, Cambridge,
Carbon,
yeah.
it's the RECs.
Well, it's not a rec, but it's currently $234 per metric ton that is saying, well, this is what needs, in order to bring people to net zero. And if you don't, it's being used to set up funds, but it's a value that has some merit and is focused on,
Right.
then it's another way to do it, evaluating of emissions.
So this is what I'm
Maybe-
thinking. It would be
Maybe
useful
we
for
can't
small-
do this.
What's that?
Maybe we can't do this. Like, I mean, I think that the number is so fraught with interpretation that either you put a range and you acknowledge that there is a range because of different attempts at interpretation. But otherwise, isn't it a bit of hand waving for us to think that we have the expertise to put a number on carbon?
Well, I don't think we would pick our own number. I'm with Mary Ann on that. But I do think it's useful to come up with some alternatives. And maybe it's like we're talking about, there's 2 or 3 different approaches to valuing carbon. Here's what they are. Here's the pros and cons of each one of them. Here's what we would recommend.
Yeah.
To back up a second, after having watched a couple of the FinCom sessions I missed, is FinCom even looking at life cycle costs? It seems like, they're focused on first costs of things, but I don't know when you.
Do you mind if I table that? Because I
Yeah.
think that's a completely
But
different
it
topic.
also gets into, my thought is that a cost of carbon is an extended life cycle cost, and in particular, we're looking at impact. And if the town hasn't adopted life cycle costing, we should certainly study carbon costs, but we need both.
I think we need both. I do think cost of carbon is independent of life cycle costs. You could do life cycle cost today without factoring in carbon on a school building, right? You could do that today. But the carbon piece is what I feel like is missing. And if we don't put anything out there, it's implicitly zero.
Yeah.
And so.
And are we proposing this because we want it to be in the plan as like, this is how we will?
No, it's in the plan actually, because I asked them to put it in the plan because. I felt like we were missing part of the equation today.
Well, we need to get the idea out there.
I had actually asked them to put the social cost of carbon on every action, and they didn't think that was feasible. So they put it at the strategy level, but that still doesn't get to what we need, which is which of those actions most would drive the reduction of that.
Reduction, yeah.
Stephen, can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
On page 19, I'm just gonna go back briefly because on that chart that's very confusing on the miles thing. They're quoting data from 2021. And I just looked, and the Massachusetts vehicle census was updated in January 2023. So they're actually quoting data from 2 years ago. and there's no need for that, and they're not the same numbers. So can that be pointed out to them to give us the more accurate data?
Yes, I'll do that. I would just ask if there's additional like comments like this on the climate action plan, if you could all email them to
Yeah.
me. That would be helpful just to have them all together. So in terms of
And
next
we
steps,
don't have just on this tracking progress one that I'm looking at the bottom with the vehicles. That number is a Massachusetts number. We don't have electric vehicles in Needham, I'm presuming.
I think you're right. I recall from our discussions, you really,
Yeah.
We
EV
can't get
numbers are
that.
tough to
R&D doesn't.
get a
really-
wrap around.
Okay. All right.
maybe we'd have somebody stand outside with a clicker someday. Yeah.
Yeah, because I looked at, my first thought when I looked at that was 2%. We have way more than 2%, and then I realized it was Massachusetts, and I'm like, okay, I guess maybe in the whole state, that's the right number, but
It still feels low.
it's not right for here, for sure.
And then the MBTA riders, is that accurate? We should.
I-
The MBTA
I
could-
hope that's accurate. Yeah, again, I don't quite know where it's from, but
So to put a pin in the social cost of carbon, does anybody want to volunteer to explore the
Feels very
variety of options
complicated.
here and come forth with some recommendations? Nobody's, am I gonna self-volunteer for this one?
oh, well,
I'll work on it.
I understand it.
I am not gonna lead that, but I'm happy to participate in it.
Okay,
I'll do that.
When you have a recommendation, I'm happy to say that.
Let me know. Yeah,
Whatever.
I'll help on that, but I think I'll be more learning than anything else.
I think
because-
we'll all be learning.
Yeah,
It's
so-
learn in a group.
Yeah, I had, I had them all on my browser like a week ago. And then I closed my browser.
all the tabs, yeah.
I had like 7 tabs. I was like, I'm gonna read all of these. And I read like 3 of them and then. Closed the tab. Anyway, from my reading between the lines in the meeting, FinCom, meeting, we really should just be going to them with a proposal. Or,
I
Even-
think we should reach out to them and ask if they have somebody who would like to join the working group,
all right, good.
okay?
Why don't we do that?
They do have the information on the percentage of zero emissions or hybrid that are registered in each municipality, so
Yeah.
Needham's 9.7%.
Oh, so why don't we
Oh,
have that?
why
data
don't,
here?
we should be using that then, it's.
Yeah.
Can you send? that
Thank
over?
you,
Yeah,
Cecilia.
over.
That seems much more plausible
Well,
to me.
that's including hybrids.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That seems low, if you include hybrids, actually. There's so many hybrids in town that you can't even tell are hybrids.
It's the same Chris.
it's,
Are they
is
plug-in
the
hybrids?
sum of all vehicles actively registered in each municipality on January 1 of 2023.
All right. 10. That, by the way, they say is the tipping point for adoption. When you hit the 10% threshold, then start to go.
See,
exponentially.
that would be a good by the numbers thing.
Yeah. All right,
Or number of chargers per
so-
capita.
so the next topic really, obviously they have work to do in this and we're not ready to bring this out.
Right.
But a roadshow for this, we talked about doing some outreach to other boards. Certainly want to bring it to the full select board, but also public as well. I think I had a placeholder put on a room at the library sometime in November. I can't remember when it is. But this was like 2 months ago. I reached out and said, do we want to put something out there?
So I guess the question is, are we ready for that? I would almost rather see it, go to the select board and then choose to do like some kind of a public hearing on it.
Okay. All right.
Don't you think that makes more sense, Kevin?
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
And, yeah,
So, we can talk offline about when you want to bring this to the select board.
okay.
But I think we'll be anytime in November, we'll have the final. And I assume we're gonna get here's a set of documents. with files that we can then manipulate and
Well,
add
we need
pages.
to get it to a place where we're pretty close to final with them, I think. We don't want to be taking it knowing we're gonna have a lot of revisions.
Agreed.
So,
So that would then argue for earlier, because I think our engagement with KLA runs out near the end of November.
I mean, it would be nice to do some outreach, because if there's some consistent things we haven't thought of here, we might wanna get their help.
Do you put out to all the working groups?
We could put it back out to all the working groups.
And just even like get back to me,
Okay.
but let's, or we have a meeting, something like that,
Once we get this next, yeah.
and then go to select board.
The 35 people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in 3 meetings.
Holy-
So it's 105 people meetings.
There you go.
Maybe that would give you sort of, do the rents.
so they finish at the end of November?
I'm not sure what the exact date is. Their engagement, it was a deliverable. Right, so until we say we feel like the deliverable is meeting our expectations, I assume we have some flexibility on extending the engagement past a certain date. But that, when we talked with them, their timeline was delivered in November. And then they're done.
Right, but you just got a draft today. End of October.
Right.
And
So-
it's,
Right, and there's problems with that, and there might
Yes.
be another
Agreed.
iteration, so
Agreed.
it could be December.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here saying it feels hard for me to say I would pin a November date, given the state of what I'm seeing tonight.
Right.
I would want to feel like we were closer to a final product. So I'm thinking it's probably later in the year that we're actually bringing it out to kind of a public
More of a
hearing or
roadshow.
to a more, yeah,
December timeframe.
yeah.
So I think do we have a meeting tomorrow?
I was gonna ask you, I think we do.
Yeah, 2:00.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can bring this feedback to them tomorrow.
Okay,
If we don't have a meeting, I'll write it up.
okay,
And I would encourage, again, anybody has any feedback that was not discussed today, send it over. And then I'll ask them about the iterations. You know, how many iterations are you planning for? Can we work in our public process into this so that, you know, okay, you're not gonna hear from us for 6 weeks while we go to the select board and to the town and et cetera. But we expect that once that process is wrapped up, we come back to you and ask for some additional changes. So I think
Yeah.
that's probably
refinements.
refinements.
That's fine. And
We have to get it to the point where it's gonna be only refinements at that point, but yes, I don't think we're there yet, but
Cecilia, do we still have $5,000 in our budget? They came in under our budgeted amount
They did.
Let me find out for you.
at 5,000. So,
Memory. Yeah, they've
so there might be a little
So we
wiggle room
gave
if
them
we
a
need it,
little-
yeah.
yeah,
For the refinements.
I can
For the
easily
refinement.
extend the
Yeah.
$5,000
date
of refinement.
without any money issues, that's not a problem.
What's the date, Cecilia? You know?
Oh, I don't. I'm opening.
Oh. And so then if you did it, try it out in December. Right, before the holidays.
It's like
Right.
present.
present.
But
And if
we
it's-
we need it then, really. Here's why we need it then, right? The goal was to have things that are gonna go into the budget. I mean, that's really the challenge.
When's the budget done?
Tomorrow.
I- I-
The
I-
answer is
in
we really need
process.
them as soon as possible. So that's why I was looking at this going, I don't know what we're budgeting for, so
Yeah,
we need it ASAP to pull out some priorities.
so,
Otherwise, we will miss the cycle.
so I think what we can probably do in our next meeting at
Yeah.
climate is to try to do that. So even though we're probably gonna be running right up against the deadline with the climate action plan, I think we ought to be able to look through this and determine what we think our next round
Right,
of priorities
for me.
For the following year.
for 2025
25.
fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah, Maytown meeting, right?
Maytown meeting.
So,
And, not
And
sure.
some of them will be things that will be supported by our sustainability coordinator, you know, by things that we've already moved into place, but.
I think
Yeah.
the biggest
Just
things will be whether or not there's any capital projects that are coming up and we want to recommend electrification where it's not already part of the plan.
Yeah,
But I think you already for Mitchell and Pollard, those are all electric, right?
yes,
The PVPC will take that approach if it's directed by the town. In other words, they will design.
well, it's
PVPC will
actually
design for
been
the,
sort of directed by the MSBA, right? So,
right,
Yeah.
it's so if we don't have it, if we don't have the specialized opt-in code in place. By the time we move forward with those projects, and it's gonna be a year before.
yeah, it's gonna be a long time still.
Then it would be, there'd be a discussion as to whether we want to go for those additional 3 percentage points.
I fully expect that by the time we're actually getting ready to go build Mitchell or Pollard,
Will be in the specialized.
Whether it's
Will be
remote
all
based
electric.
right, it will be done.
Yeah.
But also in terms of even from day one on the programming, they want to know whether the town wants to go for that additional 3%, whether we're going to commit to that.
Yeah.
Specialized code,
Yeah.
because then, you know, any of those other expenses, that becomes the standard by which the building is designed.
Right, yes.
And so it's built into the
Mhm.
costs.
All right,
So
so,
there is $5,000 left in the article. And the contract technically expires November 15th, but I can send it.
okay,
I cannot increase.
Beyond that,
I
yeah,
don't,
5,000.
I don't actually, let me do some research. I'm not sure if I can legally increase it above.
But we could do an ad service for the balance.
Okay, we did an RFP, yes, we can. So we have 5,000 more if they need more money.
All right,
okay,
so we won't talk money tomorrow, but we can at least talk about
Yeah, time.
what we need to do.
what we need to get to.
Really tell them we
Three
have
weeks left.
$5,000.
And trying to get them even to help us pull out sooner rather than later. Are there things for next year
Yeah,
that we need to be clear about now?
I think visually, I agree that we really ought to have a way to take these actions. And at the very least, star in each section, this is the most important thing to do in the next 5
Yeah.
years. And then we pick a starred item. We're confident that we're doing something that's.
Right.
Right, that in each of our groups, we did do that.
Right.
We did, and we might be able to layer that in, but yeah, I think it helps to have a little bit of a consultant outside view on that as well.
Right, I mean, we could put stars, literally, put a star next to the 2 priorities in each category.
And some of these things, you know, for example, for renewable energy, the first thing we actually have to do is item C to update zoning and permitting.
Right.
You know, and that's one of the things that
The enablers, yeah,
it's not sexy, but it's gotta be done.
Yeah,
yeah, and
So-
it's not a cost item, it's just a
Right.
priority item.
right.
But at any rate, we need to pull those out.
We do
That's
need to pull
clearly
those out.
important.
So.
But
that
where
might be-
there are items that have a cost, they haven't really given us any indication of that, right?
No,
And we did ask for that. with RFP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause that will help us with.
would you mind sending me that RFP again? I'd just love to read it before our meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Great.
This has been a good discussion.
All right, so we've gotten all the way down to Eversource transforming units. That's our last topic. It's come up in public meetings. It is probably one of the major sources of angst on builder communities, if not the. Same source of angst, and it's come up in Needham with the PSAB transformers that are powering the charger that's charging my car right now. So we needed upgrades there in order to install those EV chargers there. So it's a real topic. I think that,
What, are we waiting for new transformers for here?
no, we had to wait.
Oh, we had to wait, okay.
There are 3 boxes, there are 3 cans up in
Yeah.
there.
And we only had
Put in
one.
a new pole. Yeah, I mean, we wait forever for transformers. We're waiting for a transformer for the, actually, the engineering detail to allow us to put the transformer at Emery Grove. I mean, they are just so slow.
How many months would you put it at?
I think we'll get it before the building opens, but
So it's a real problem. And it potentially could impact individual home projects. So, you know, typically homes that were built in the 1930s are 100 amp service. Most homes built in the last 20 years have been 200 amp service, and now with people looking for 2 EV chargers and maybe all electric appliances, you're over 200 amps. If 400 amps is the next level, there's no 300, but 200, 400. The CAN may not be able to deliver that, and that's what is triggering the requests for upgrades. We've heard from builders that it's anywhere from 9 to 12 months. To
I was
get
gonna say 9 to 16 is what I heard.
9 to 16.
9 to 16 months.
9 to 16 months. 9 is probably within their time frame for building a house. 16 is 4
It's
months
not.
beyond building that house. So I did have.
Which will have a cost for them and a cost for the consumer.
Right, because I'll have to carry that house for 4 more
For
months.
4
which
more
is-
months,
which
just
is
waiting
debt-
for
debt
that.
service.
Right.
So I did have a talk with one of the builders who was at
Yeah.
the meeting, and he tentatively agreed that we should bring this to our state representatives. And have a concerted sort of builders, town. People who are concerned about climate change. Making sure that Representative Garlick and Senator Roush understand the scope of the problem. That we find the right pathway to elevate that at the state level. And really kind of take this as this is something, if we really want to electrify, we have to be serious about working on this problem too. So I wanted to raise it and just see if people had ideas, thoughts. Marion,
I think we should also go back to the Eversource guys who we met to,
Yeah,
feed it back in through them. I mean, the answer is, with Eversource, you have to send it in every direction you can find.
yeah,
But what we know is they're a challenge to deal with. I mean, we've worked through our representatives before. We certainly can work with our representatives again, but Eversource is, I say all the time, the utility that everyone loves to hate, so.
yeah. There's one thing that bothers me about the way they're doing it, which is it feels very ad hoc, right? It doesn't feel like they have a strategic plan for going and upgrading transformers. And I get it, they want to wait for the demand to manifest itself before they do something. And maybe they have staffing shortages, but it's also the way that they build the project that triggers the CAN.
Mhm.
Did we get billed for those 2 that were put up here, the extra ones that were put up?
No,
They didn't
the,
charge me.
no, that came through the, a lot of those upgrades came through the settlement with, VW. So there's the Mass VIP, EVIP program, and then there's also the charge. There's a-
The Volkswagen settlement, the Dieselgate settlement, which I don't know if there's how much funding is left. There's like $2 billion or something at one point.
Yeah, I think they've eaten through that. at This point.
So, but one of the things that, so the charging is an issue. It would seem like if the state really wants to accelerate this, they need to find a new funding mechanism that is not point of. Because I imagine there's some back and forth there. It's gonna cost you $6,000. Are you gonna pay it? Yeah, I'm gonna pay it. Okay, fill out this form that says you're gonna pay it. Give us a deposit. Now you're in the queue. It ought to be just utilities are going to do it, and there's a fund that they pay out of it, and they do it as these things come. But it's-
I think this is in part a supply chain issue. As what I've heard.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as
Is
well.
that when we put the embargo or the constraints on importing from China, we immediately cut the supply of transformers by 25% or more, maybe even a third, because those were now either way too expensive, the tariffs were way too expensive, and we just weren't importing them from China. And the manufacturing within the United States hadn't caught up yet. So there's this pretty huge supply chain issue.
Okay, wasn't aware of that. That sounds like more like a Washington one.
It's not,
Well,
it's
and
not
did
just
you
an
get the
Eversource, I mean,
invite?
some of it is
The-
utility.
To Marky's,
Yeah,
Markey
culture.
has a office,
But there are
open
some-
up. Kate sent this around.
Legit issues.
So to Mary Ann's point, it
I
feels
don't
like we
think
need
so.
to tackle the small directions.
When is it though?
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
I'm gonna listen in from
I do not
10 to
think I
12.
saw it.
Who's doing this?
Markey, clean energy and climate funding opportunities, as well as here, priority clean energy and climate projects pursued by individuals, communities, and schools. So I don't exactly know. I've never done one of these listen-in things, but I can forward it to you.
Sure. I don't know if I can join.
You know, who's the guy from DOER we talked to about passive homes and stuff like that? Was that?
So it begins with a Z.
Reach out to him and just say, you know, you guys are recommending all this stuff, but none of it can be generally supported by Eversource.
Yeah.
What's your plan? They're saying it, they're demanding, it, you know, they're saying some standards, but they can't be fulfilled.
One of the challenges is even like the Eversource guys who presented to us are on the planning side. They're sort of the thinkers and the big picture people and the people who come in and say, well, you're gonna need this on this street, because they alluded to the fact that maybe in a couple of years, they'll have maybe a map to know the capacity, and they're different, completely different animals. The field people, and I'll say guys, because they're mostly men, are in the trenches and looking at the individual things, and the people in Westwood or wherever, Connecticut, don't really interact with them. And they don't get down to the micro level, and is it worth talking to other towns and sort of, you know, getting,
I don't think it could hurt if
With
we had
Newton.
a concerted effort across
That's
towns.
regional, yeah.
Yeah.
because, you know, let's say where they're doing this no fossil fuel code,
Yeah.
they're facing it, everyone's facing it.
Well, you know what I can do?
Kevin,
So,
we should add that to our list for the mayor.
Yeah.
okay, so it feels like there needs to be multiple
Prongs.
fronts open. I was thinking fronts. I will follow up with the builder, and see if he's still interested in talking. It probably makes sense to reach out to at least our neighboring towns that have sustainability coordinators to see if they're experiencing similar things. I guess Wellesley would not.
Wellesley wouldn't.
Because of the municipal light plant, so it'd have to be somebody who's on Eversource. And then let's see if we can get some time with Denise and Becca. Maybe it's also Auchincloss and Warren or Markey.
Warren.
I'm happy to spearhead that, and Mary Ann, since you're the chair, I'll just copy you on everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Then we'll just see where those things go. And then if anybody has any other ideas or
I
wants to
mean,
get involved.
Wellesley may see the supply chain issue, so it's probably
Mhm.
still worth asking them
Yeah.
what they're seeing.
That's true.
Actually, be very helpful,
Because it gives you
because
an
they're
alternative,
neutral and,
right? Yeah.
Okay, and I'll also reach out to a couple of what do we call listservs that I'm on to see who
Yeah.
else is dealing with it and if they want to become involved.
And I'm curious, right, we could go back, those first 4 towns that implemented specialized code,
Are they seeing issues?
are they seeing issues? I keep saying we haven't heard yowls, but
No. Who was it who just was speaking to a builders? You were talking to Bill Paulson.
Yeah,
So Bill Paulson provided some data. He reached out to a bunch of the builders that he works with and to ask them about their issues. I think it was more about the electrical panels, right? It was the 400 amp service
it's a
panels.
400 amp service and the frustration of not knowing. If they buy a house or tear down, are they gonna need, is it gonna trigger this whole process or not, until they actually go and pull a permit?
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so Eversource won't even tell you if you're capable of putting in a 400 amp service unless you're the owner.
There's on this topic, I'll forward this to you as well. MAPC was appointed to the Grid Modernization Advisory Council. And so I'll forward this to all of you. And there's a listening session on November 7th from 9:30 to 11. It sounds like they're addressing this issue.
This issue
Well, not, but the broader issue
of grid
of
modernization.
grid modernization, but also, the ability to both forecast and reliability, resiliency, and readiness.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
would think this
I mean,
would fall within this.
The readiness question is the one that really, as you say, bothers the builders
Yeah,
in town. I don't see that that's gonna change actually between now and next May.
Or even
Um,
10 years from now.
Well, but certainly not between now and the spring. That will not be
Yeah.
something that I expect to see change. It's from,
Yeah.
I understand the problem.
That's right. Bill did say that most of his builders he's working with are already at 400 amps.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is that this code is not going to trip the need for 400 amps. It's already becoming the standard for large homes
Right.
under the current code.
Under
All
the
right.
current stretch code
Under the current
and
stretch
the
code.
current building practices. Yeah.
Exactly. In our area.
Yeah.
All right, so I feel like we've probably gone as far as we can on that. I'll start doing some outreach and I'll loop you and Mary Ann, and then anybody else has an interest, let me know. So that's our last topic.
Okay.
Unless anybody has a walk-in topic, I'll entertain the motion.
When are we meeting next?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Since I know if you're not at this meeting, you never know what the date is, so we'll have to make sure we tell people.
Until you run into me two days before the meeting. So we have Thanksgiving next month, which,
That's on Thursday this year, right?
yeah.
We're not canceling it for CAPC.
No?
No,
How about the 30th of November?
30th?
Well, let me back this up. When do you need your priorities for budget cycle? What's your deadline?
the sooner the better.
So should we short cycle and see if we can get something the week before
16th?
Thanksgiving? I'm available on the 16th. Rachel, yes?
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah. November 16th.
Mary Ann, yes?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm not available.
Not available.
It's fine, it's-
Paul, November 16th, Thursday, 6 P.M.
Yes.
All right, we'll need you. Artie, November 16th at 6 P.M.
Which date in November?
November 16, a Thursday.
That should be fine. I can't think of anything that would be on that night. That should be fine. Thank you.
All right, that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're missing Joe. We can ask him afterwards.
Okay,
So if everybody could put that on their calendar, 6 P.M., November
PSAB.
16th. Where is PSAB available?
Likely. I don't think there's very many Thursday night meetings.
Do you know where it's gonna be?
We're
Cecile,
checking.
Cecile is checking right now.
We have the technology.
Wow.
$6 million man reference there.
After inflation, what is it?
Yeah, what did you have to now?
Oh, it is not.
Oh, my goodness. Upstairs?
And very small room.
Uh, Who's in here?
Well, conservation, I think, has Thursday evening stuff. Maybe zoning board of appeals.
Should we do great playroom or?
All right, so why don't we say we'll find a place?
We'll
There's
find a
gotta be
place.
some place in town
Someplace
that
in.
night.
okay.
Oh, I can find a room in town hall.
Don't you work there now?
That'd be much more convenient for
Not
you.
to move it or anything.
In your office. While we're working at, why don't we get a motion, to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, Nick? We do a voice vote on this, even though it's hybrid, we can do a voice vote?
You have to
Yep.
do
Nick,
roll call
Nick,
under a hybrid.
Aye, adjourn.
okay, Kevin?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Mary Ann, Paul,
I,
Artie,
Aye, aye.
and the chair votes aye. We are adjourned.
Right.
thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
It is zoning, but
Good.
we can keep over roads in town hall.
Okay, do you want to pick one for us?
A nice one.
A nice one, good view.
Well, not that stuff is, not that
One.
not that stuff is select word.
Oh, I know.
Whatever the owl likes.
Yes.
Great Plain Room or the.
Great
For
plan.
what it's worth, $6 million man is now the $32 million, $455,000.
Wow.
So. We've adjourned.
Wow.
So he has actually depreciating assets.
Well,
So,
that's so true.
I mean, if you think of technology, he
Well,
actually
yes,
it's
it's-
probably like a $7.
He's running on paper tapes.